All right, man. We haven't done this in a long time.
I know, right? It's nice to have just me and you for an episode. Not sure what we're going to talk about today, but I'm excited to just be doing this like
No, but that's the
us.
point. We used to do podcasts sometimes in the beginning of like we have nothing to talk about. We're just gonna
Yeah,
get on and whatever we want to talk about, we talk about.
yeah, 100%, man.
And some of those were some of the best we've ever done.
Yeah, they are because it opens up because it leaves the free form, right? I was just talking with somebody about just keep the possibilities coming for yourself. Don't block yourself because if you don't consider what other things can be possibilities, then you feel stuck, right? A lot of times we're working on something and we only see the possibilities we have identified. We don't always see the possibilities that are really out there for us and what the opportunities are. And that's such an important part of our growth mindset is what's the opportunity and what are all the opportunities? And when you start to see that, you feel less stagnant at times. You feel you don't allow yourself to get stuck because there's always that opportunity in front of you.
But how is someone like when you were talking to them, how do they see an opportunity if they can't see the opportunity? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like I was talking to one of our clients who is a real estate agent, and he's got a place out east, and he's into flipping houses. And when he flips the houses, he recognizes that he's really only working in one area. And I said to him, and he felt stuck today. He was like, I'm not finding it. I said, well, where are you looking? He's like, well, I've really been concentrating here. I'm like, well, what about concentrating in another town or opening your scope or even considering another state, right? It doesn't mean you only need to do this here, right? And he was like, oh, yeah, right. Why am I doing that? So like he knows what he's doing, but he's keeping himself in a geographic location because it's comfortable, because it's convenient. But I'm like, dude, if you open up and expand a little bit, you're going to be able to move in more directions and have more possibilities. It's a numbers game, especially real estate, big numbers game.
I wonder how that ties back to how you started this. How did you start it again?
I said you have to keep the possibilities rolling and the opportunities, keep seeing the opportunities. Otherwise, you start to feel stuck.
That's interesting because is it like a vicious cycle almost? Like you think there are no opportunities and you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, that old cliche, and then you can't really move forward with looking at anything else because you're stuck looking at the same thing. It's like I'm saying, like almost like a vicious cycle,
Yeah, you put yourself in the box and you're staying in the box, right? You're not like to use your, what do you call it? Like bound creativity, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're in that box and you're not expressing your bound creativity, then you're stuck in the box, right? But if you start to open up that box a little bit or try to push on it and really just occupy every space of it, then you can be creative in what you're doing. And he's bound, he's got these lines in the sand that he's going to work in this town.
Right.
Like just cross the street, man, and you're in another town, right? Like,
so at what point for that specific client, maybe for general audience listening, at what point do you say, all right, I'm going to go from this bound creativity, saying here are my parameters, here are my boundaries, here are my whatever, to like, all right, I'm going to explore outside of the norm.
When you start to feel that stuck feeling, you have to move beyond the comfort zone. You got to.
Do you find it funny? Because now as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about many of our clients. It's funny because a lot of times when things are going really well, people go outside, but when things are going really bad, they stay inside, right? It's like,
yeah.
It kind of should be the opposite.
Exactly. We tend to isolate when things are not good. It's the isolation effect, right? Like, oh shit, things are getting bad. I don't know what to do. Like our client earlier this morning, like all this, like he's stressed out because cash flow is a little slow right now, but he just paid $100,000 in bills over the last 2 months, and like you're forgetting what you accomplished, right? And now he's like, oh, this has been a shit month and it's not great. Now he's putting himself in that box.
But it's something funny in hindsight that I realized, sometimes when we're in those meetings, those are 2-hour-long meetings. Sometimes when we're in them, you're in it, and you can't really analyze because you're in the moment. And then afterwards, I was reflecting on it, and I'm knowing that person. I'm now curious. I wonder what you think. I was curious if it was just self-sabotage, if he's putting himself in that situation because he's so familiar with being tight on cash that he didn't want to allow himself to feel that level of comfort.
Yeah, well, that's why I said to him, that's why the lack mindset and the scarcity mindset, right? Somebody who has always operated from a scarcity mindset and someone who, and everyday life, right? If you're complaining about paying bills, you got to reframe that to, I have the money to pay the bills. How awesome is that?
Yep.
Right?
But did he put himself in the position where he can pay bills? So what I'm wondering is, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Did he have the lack mindset, which made him do that, or did he do that, which made him have the lack mindset?
Yeah, I would say he did that so he would have the lack mindset because
Right.
because that is his comfort zone right now.
Yes.
That's been his comfort zone for years. So he's creating a worse situation out of a situation that is really good. Like you said to him, dude, look at it. You got all this money in, you got to pay all this money out. This is a successful operation that you're running here. But he doesn't want I don't think that it's a conscious decision either. I think it's just his inherent default. I think it's a subconscious default to push back into that scarcity mindset when he does have abundance.
Well, I'm not a psychologist. I just play one on TV. So what I've learned over my history of really working with so many people, and then I think it's drastically increased my knowledge base since working with you, is that people like that go do that. It is their comfort zone, but what I've learned is, why is it their comfort zone, right? And the thing is it's familiar. And I find so many people, even if the situation is negative, and even if they know it's negative, it's familiar. So it's like, okay, I'm used to this. I know this thing. I know, even though it hurts and it feels bad and it stresses me out and whatever it is, right? It's familiar. So there's no surprises going to come up, good or bad. So that's why it turns into their comfort zone, because of that familiarity. And that's why I always tell people is like, it's this dumb cliche, be comfortable. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I don't really use it, right? It's just been played out. So what I usually say is you have to seek these new adventures. You have to look at it as like, this is your opportunity to explore. And I talk about it all the time with my 3 priorities, right? My number 1 priority is the ability for me to explore, discover, and create as I wish. The reason I want to explore is because it's unfamiliar territory. It's uncharted territory. And most business owners, they are trailblazers, right? They've gone down a path that was never there. They created it. And even if they went down a path that was there, they deviated to the left or the right with a bulldozer and created their path along that path. And then when I see them regressing back to familiar habits, which is usually induced by it usually comes from financial or time stress, one of those two, in my experience of it, financial or time stress. They deviate back to those old familiar habits, and those familiar habits are usually negative. That's why they've moved past them. So it's an interesting thing when someone is stuck, and what I'm saying now is I'm wondering if they're making themselves stuck, some of these people. Like,
well, I think
you think they made themselves stuck?
I think sometimes subconsciously there is a default to put yourself back into that zone. I think you're 100% right. I agree that, a lot of times, being broke and having a scarcity mindset and worrying about every dollar and doing all of that is default programming for a lot of people. And it is comfortable. As uncomfortable as it is comfortable for that person who is used to living that way.
Yeah, that's my point. Is it's not a positive thing, but it feels familiar.
Right. Because they maybe too have even used that as the motivator to keep going and doing the thing, right? Like, if I always live with this, I don't have enough money, that's going to motivate me to go keep making more money, right? So it's that negative, there's negative and positive feedback loops. And this is a negative feedback loop that does get results for people. And that's why sometimes it's so hard when some people, like another one of our clients, he's like, he came from the corporate world. He's now an HR advisor. And yesterday we were talking during one of the sessions, because we were talking about limiting beliefs. And he is so stuck on that. He is not enjoying his revenue because he's not working hard enough, in his opinion. I said, the work is different, man. The work is different. You've transformed how you work. All of the hard work you did in corporate to get you to this point, to be a business owner and run your own HR consulting company, all of that hard work, you're reaping the benefits of now. You don't have to work 40 hours to earn that money. You can work 3 hours a week to earn that money, which he's doing. And he kind of feels bad about it. And I'm like, well, then take it a step further. What are you doing to nurture that relationship, to continue to build that relationship so they stay with you, right? Put the effort and the energy into that as well as the work that you're doing. It's just deciding what is the work that you need to do. But he's stuck in, I gotta work hard, but I'm not working hard, but I don't need to work hard. And it's this vicious cycle. And so it's like we have two different clients here. One is always living in scarcity and keeps working and pushing, and the other one is living well and is not necessarily pushing. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic.
Well, that's why I don't like that cliche, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because when people think of uncomfortable, they put a negative connotation on it. And I'd rather put familiar, because then it's not like, don't have the familiar, because whatever, and many people, that let's take that broke mindset thing, right? They're like, oh, if I live broke, one of my favorite books is The Millionaire Next Door. And that's basically what they're saying, is like, live well below your means, right? And like, that's kind of what the whole thing is, and live broke and, acquire assets and save your money and then you'll be fine. It's a wonderful concept. But when you do that long enough, okay, you can move beyond it. And that's the thing, is if that broke mindset got you to the place and really gave you this grit and this desire and this discipline to get to where you are now, well, it might never take you to where you want to go. It might have just been needed as a tool to get you here, but now you have to get unfamiliar again and start with another tactic. And it may be something similar to that, but it might not be able to, and most likely it won't be able to be that same exact thing, because that was only good enough to get you here. And that's why I'm always talking to these people, like we did today with our client, is like, hey, you have to look at this completely different now. And that's, the second chapter of our book, or the second principle in our book, is surrender. And it's saying you have to surrender your old life and accept this new one. And that's really what that is. And it sounds like you were talking about that to the real estate person, is more along the lines of, you have to surrender. I'm the king of this territory and I have to expand out.
Correct. Yeah. It's so true. Like, people struggle to surrender. People struggle to see what they've accomplished because they want to just keep going and keep the motivation moving forward. And that just negatively impacts them. And like our client this morning, he has done an amazing job over the last year in conquering so many battles, in getting through so many difficult circumstances, but he still defaults back to that familiar. And I can't wait for the day that we see him break that. Like, I just can't. And I know it's coming, and it's going to come when he starts to understand more too about how he can forecast his revenue differently and how he can forecast his expenses. And because he said to me when you had stepped away, he said, I just don't get all this yet. I said, well, you haven't seen enough regular recurrence to come up with some predictability. There's a lot of predictability in those recurrences that you see. And once you understand those, it becomes a little bit.
Well, usually the issue, and we've seen this a lot with our one-on-one clients, is that they're not yet thinking like a business owner, right? They got here because they had a really good skill set or some knowledge or some access to certain potential clients. And then when they come in here, they do that and they have success. And this gentleman has. He's had success to a level, but they're not thinking like business owners yet. And there's a many different ways, but even with this situation, we were talking about think like a business owner for the things you want to do, not just like running your business. Like, yes, that's one way, but you have to think as a business owner in the other things that you do in your life. When we were talking about, negotiations, we were talking about access to capital. We were like, think not only as you are the business owner, but think when you're talking to other people, like they are the business owner. And that's the thing is you have to think as a business owner. So, think about it like this. If you're on a team and you're playing a sport, okay, and that sport happens to be football, but you're a basketball player, right? You're in the sport, right? But if you're not thinking like a football player, can you do certain plays? And you can, but if you thought like a football player, okay, you would play football better. Okay. But if you're thinking like a salesman and you're running a business, they're both revenue generations. That's their sport, revenue generation. But if you're thinking like the salesperson or the basketball player, you're not going to play business or football very well. It's like you have to change as you change the sports you're playing, and it's like, hey, and the same could go if you're going from minor leagues in baseball to major leagues. Everything's different bats, or maybe college. Let's do that. If you're going from college to the major leagues, like the fields are different, the competition's different, the bats are different, the rules are different, everything is different. It's the same sport, but it's like, oh, I have to think about this a different way. You have to train your body a different way. You have to train your mind a different way. And that's what it means is when you're going to start thinking like a business owner, it's not just internally, it's externally.
Right. Because you have to be willing to make those adjustments. If you don't know how to make those adjustments, that's what keeps you as the salesman versus the business owner. You've got to be willing to learn and to make the adjustments and to see that there's other opportunities in those other things if you make that adjustment, right? Like we talked earlier, it's adjusting that line. Walk across the street. It's a different town.
But that's what I'm saying is, and I'm trying to tie it all back to that statement you made. It's not that I asked you, how do you see those opportunities? And I'm just bringing it to like, if you think as a business owner, you're going to start to see through other businesses' lens, right? And we were talking about a bank, and literally we were talking about lending and this and that. Like they're in the business of lending. They want you to borrow money because he was a little worried. Like, I don't know if they're going to want me to do, I'm going to ask them if I can. And I was like, whoa. They would love for you to take money from them as long as you're a viable candidate to pay it back, which you are. And it's weird to even think like that. But in the past, it's like when you're a civilian, so to speak, it's like, oh, lending and getting, I hope they give me money for this house. But it's a different mindset when you're a business owner. It's like, oh, they can't wait to give you money because that's how they make money. So think about their businesses. Oh, if I help their business and they're helping my business, we all win. And that is business. Right? It's just exploiting all these opportunities for all of us to help one another and do really well. If you start putting yourself in that mindset, then you're going to think of these other opportunities, not only opportunities for you, but opportunities for other business owners.
Exactly.
That then tend to help you.
Right. Well, it's always trying to find what's mutually beneficial. How many times do we say to people, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to approach this. This is a tough conversation. And how many times they say, find the mutual benefit. You gotta learn how to look for the win-win in every opportunity, especially as a business owner. How does working with this company or this vendor benefit you and them? Right? How does it? And if you don't see that, then you're really hurting yourself and putting yourself at a disadvantage as your business and as the owner of your business.
That's it, man. I got to tell you, I've had this theme this year of do less but better.
Yep.
And I do remind myself of it, but it's really hard. It's really hard to constantly stay in do less. And I heard someone, Rory Sutherland, he's a marketing genius from the UK. And he said something the other day. He's like, most people, when they deal with their problems, they deal with them by adding something. And he's like, but it's much, much better to deal with your problems by removing things. And obviously this stood out because of the theme, do less but better, for my year. When I started to think about how many of my problems or how many of our clients' problems are being dealt with by adding something. Oh, I'm not making enough sales. I better add a salesperson. I can't deliver.
Yeah.
I can't deliver all my productivity. We have one client. I can't deliver my productivity. I'm going to add a new software that does that for me. It's like, how much is being added to solve a problem when it really should be, well, what here can we remove to solve the problem?
That's really interesting. Like I've been thinking a lot. I haven't thought about do less but better in a couple of days. On vacation last week, I don't know. I was doing less and I was doing better. But it really, you're right. It's like, it should never be just what can I add to make this better or what can I do more of? It really is what should I subtract? What should I take away from this? Because what am I doing that is really impeding me? Oh, I'm just going to stop doing that, right? Like, and that's where I always go to the impact and the effectiveness of what you do, right? If you can do a project in 10 hours, great. You did less, but better. And it was a good project. But you could also spend 30 to 60 hours on that project, but it may not come out as good. So don't do that much more. Like, do less, have the impact. What is the impact? How effective is it? And if you find that and you can do that, that's really what you should be doing to solve your problems, is looking, what is the less I could be doing here? What's the thing to subtract? It's that theory of addition by subtraction, right? That's what it is. It's the theory of addition by subtraction.
That is what it is, because it's different than do less but better. Because do less but better means do less things, right? But the things that you're going to keep doing, do those much better, right? Okay, so that means this is, if you're solving your problems, don't add things, remove things that are the problems. Don't add things to solve the problem. Maybe remove the things that are the problems. And it's funny because it really, because I thought about it, and then I'm like, I didn't consciously implement this, but I was doing it, and then I reflected back of, oh, there was a place that instead of to solve my problem, I added something, I removed something. So twice this week, both in group coaching and in one-on-one coaching, we have systematic approaches to a lot of the things we do, one-on-one or group, like priorities with purpose. We follow these cadence, and then, with our phases that we do, we're going through teaching these lessons. And twice, once in group and once in one-on-one. This week, I was talking to people, and instead of me sticking to the curriculum, let's say, or sticking to the system and the steps, I was literally just present with the person and assessing their problem. And instead of doing, to solve it, adding more, like, okay, I got to teach them this point and that point, that I just removed it. I'm like, all right, let me remove that. Okay, get out of here. And let me just listen, and let me just talk and do what I'm natural at. And it actually ended up impacting them for what they needed in those moments, both in group and individual, for exactly what they needed. And it was perfect. And I'm like, okay, so it did solve the problem. I didn't have to add, all right, you know what you should do? Do this. I was like, all right, where is it? Where are we? What do I know of you? What do I know of the situation? And how do we go through this? And that's why I was talking to you the other night at the event about it. Maybe I just have to go back to being able to just be me in those moments instead of following a protocol or a methodology it's interesting how it dovetailed from my theme of do less but better. And then he said this, and
yeah, but you think about it. What do we tell everybody? To find the signal, you got to turn down the noise, right?
Well, yeah.
That's the thing. I
think many people, including us and me,
yeah.
To find that signal, a lot of times you're adding things.
Right.
That's what he was saying, and that's what I'm starting to notice. Like, look, we're about to go sell a course, right? We have our amazing course, which I'm really pumped about it. I watched our starter course today, by the way. It really is good, and I was concerned that our wrap-up wouldn't match up with everything, but it does. So I'm like, all right. I watched the whole thing today, by the way. So
I'll watch it later.
My controller came out, so but for good reason. Anyway, we're about to sell this course, right? And, we're in our networking and mastermind group called First M that really is there to help people make their first million. And even we are lucky enough to participate in that. And it was, we were talking about, hey, we really don't know how to sell a course. But let's just explore that for a couple of minutes. Like, all right, we know what we could add, right? We know we could add meta ads. We know we could add SEO. We know we could add Google. But is there anything that we could remove that would allow us to sell the course better? Isn't that an interesting way to think of this?
That's a good one.
Right.
Is there something we can remove?
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching and listening, you're going to get to see us think out loud.
This is interesting.
In anything that we're doing, what could what could be removed? We could remove campaigns, right? So
yes,
you could be like, forget the campaigns.
Yeah. Don't bother people with emails and all that stuff.
Right. You could remove, one-on-one meetings with people. You could remove social media talking about. I'm listing the things we could remove. Not saying we would remove any of these.
Yeah.
Right. We could remove promoting it on podcasts, like I think I just did.
Right. Exactly. We'll put a link for the course down below.
Okay. Well, look. So we could remove links, right? So think about that one, right? You could remove links, and the only way to do it is to talk to us, right? That's it. That could be something. Instead of all the shit we could add to try to make this course be sold better.
Yeah, because you could do a gazillion things and it all becomes noise and you don't know anything that's effective.
So wait a minute,
Lose
if
it.
you're removing things because you're doing that, you're doing less. And then you could do the things that you would do much better. Like, for instance, what if we just went to our natural network of people that we know either their teams could use this or not, and be like, hey, I want to meet with you. And we just sat there at our office in a coffee shop and be like, look, I think you should, like we know the guy in Tampa. Imagine if we flew down there and said, hey, look, you and all your other agencies that you have, does this make sense? That would be removing sending him a proposal and
Right. All that noise. All that
right?
noise. Just get to the point, right? Like
It could be,
that.
but most people like that's not scalable. But does it solve the problem?
Mm,
It's an interesting way to think.
it's
right?
an interesting way to think. Wow. All right.
All right. So I guess we'll explore this in more depth.
Yeah, we're gonna have to
on our Friday meetings when we
yes,
start
sir.
the business.
Yeah. Like, what can we remove to make this better?
All right. So this was fun to be able to just
Yeah, that was
I
good.
haven't done it in a while.
Yeah, it was good to do it this way.
When
All
we
right.
started it, it felt more like a Joe Rogan podcast because I'm always curious, like, how does he just goes into conversation and it never feels forced. And you did that today. You just talked and it didn't feel forced or anything.
Just offered, man. It was good. Thanks, man. That was great. All right. See you again.
Later.